It is IB Countdown to Kickoff. Along with Jesse Stiers, I am Sean Stiers as we roll into week 2. Notre Dame and Northern Illinois home opener this weekend, 3:30 Eastern time at Notre Dame Stadium. Of course, you can watch it on NBC or on the Peacock app, and you can also listen on the radio virtually around the world on the internet on the Odyssey app. And now it is not spelled like Homer's Odyssey. It is AUDACY.com or the Odyssey app. AUDACY. That's where you can find the Notre Dame radio broadcast. How are you today, Jess?
I'm doing well. It's Friday. Just got a new car. Got to drive that home. I'm riding around in style now. I can't complain. You're going to be in town this weekend for the Cowboys and Browns game. So pretty excited about it.
Absolutely. Well, let's just kick it off as we get into, like we said, it is home opening weekend, but Notre Dame coming off a big road win over Texas A&M last week. How important was this? Let's start at the top of the pecking order. How important do you think it was for Marcus Freeman, just Marcus Freeman specifically, to go to A&M and get that win last week?
Yeah, I think it's a huge statement for Marcus Freeman in year 3 as a head coach. I think that there was a lot of kind of question marks going into the season. Are we going to see a more refined, matured, basically, better overall coach in Marcus Freeman? And I think there was no better way to start the season and going into SEC territory, playing at what's considered, the most hostile environments, and getting the job done. And not only did we see, Marcus Freeman, the coach, but we saw Marcus Freeman, the motivator, got his guys ready. And I think that was the ultimate difference maker. I think that guys are going to trust you and buy in and play harder for you, if you're able to motivate and show them that they can basically trust you, right? And so Marcus Freeman did a tremendous job of letting his players know that he has their back, and they were going to come out of, Kyle Field with the victory no matter what. So huge statement for Marcus Freeman in year 3.
Yeah, I think the thing that people are still talking about here almost a week later is the whole video from the tunnel of him fired up and firing at his guys up and the offensive line behind him and the whole thing. And someone, I can't remember if it was on the message board or one of our YouTube show posts or whatever, someone said, could that have been very intentional of Marcus Freeman? Just the fact that those young offensive linemen were up there right behind him, like first guys out of the tunnel and that whole thing. Like, could it have been intentional that he wanted them right there? He did say that it was intentional on his part, that, that he went up with the fire and brimstone and the emotion and basically telling like you could see him telling those guys that he believed in them and he knew that they were going to get the job done and that kind of stuff. Do you think it could have been intentional, just that it was him and the line there at the start? Or is it just like these, typically they come out with, now that I think about it, they do come out with the offensive line out front quite a bit. It's like your biggest guys get off the bus first kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it was definitely intentional. And I think earlier in the week, someone said in the chat when we were kind of discussing this that, the offensive line is usually who kind of leads the team out of the tunnel. But I think it was very deliberate this week. I think there was, no one else was going to do it. Your offensive line is what's going to, protect you and, carry you throughout the game. And they were going to be the ones, on the front line, essentially, right? So the whole team was behind the offensive line. I love the motto that it sent. And of course, Marcus Freeman out there getting those guys fired up. It was great. Before we got on the show today, I was showing you that clip of, Nick Saban on Pat McAfee show, just talking about how he loves Marcus Freeman and how he really enjoyed, seeing what he did. And certain situations call for that. As a head coach, you have to have a gauge of your team and kind of what's right in the moment. And I think that's exactly what Marcus Freeman did. And, it goes to me to the testament of the offseason. Not only do the players get better and train harder, but Marcus Freeman had a commitment to getting better as a head coach, right? He said he studied different things on different stops, on different trips that he took, throughout the offseason. I think it definitely showed. He's obviously there's still a lot to go in the rest of this season, but I like the Marcus Freeman I saw in that first game, and it was definitely different than the first 2 seasons of Marcus Freeman that we've seen.
And I do think it was important for him to be able to go into that environment, especially with essentially vast majority of the experts, analysts, whatever you want to call them, picking against Notre Dame, saying that it was an unwinnable situation. And look, Marcus Freeman couldn't even go on the road and beat an average Clemson team or a better than average or better than expected Louisville team last year. So for him to go on the road right away, this is to me, other than beating USC and Caleb Williams maybe last season, you could debate which one is bigger, I guess. But in terms of what he's done just in road games, this is definitely his biggest win. And it was a ranked opponent. It was an SEC opponent, all those different things. So I think it's really big for Marcus Freeman to be able to kind of get this notch in his belt and to pick up this kind of win, not just play close in this kind of game, but to pick up the victory on the road against a ranked Texas A&M team. The offense was not necessarily spectacular, but they obviously made plays when they need to. Do you want to talk about the offense first or the defense first?
I think there's more to kind of consider with the offense. So.
Okay, let's do that. They've said this week that the game plan against Texas A&M was specific to Texas A&M, specific to Notre Dame's inexperienced offensive line going up against a really good Texas A&M defensive line. They got the ball out quick. They didn't ask Riley Leonard to stand in the pocket and, look downfield, look for deep routes and those different kind of things. How differently, though, do you think this offense looks now over the next month potentially?
I think you're going to see nothing like too drastic. I think the number one thing that you'll see, this offensive line is naturally going to get better. They're not going to be going against one of the top defensive lines in the country and the environment like Highfield every Saturday. And so when you look at those things, I believe it was very, very obvious that they were designing plays to get the ball out now. They weren't asking their offensive linemen to block, overly long. They knew they needed to get the ball out. But I mean, let's not forget they still ran the ball for 198 total yards on the ground. I think that's a huge stat considering who they were playing on the road. I just think now you're going to see more of development routes, not timing routes, development routes downfield, allowing wide receivers to kind of get open, more downfield, I guess is what I would say. Less timing, let's get the ball out. And we talked about this, I think, yesterday. Riley Leonard is not going to run the ball as much in these quarterback design runs over the next few games. I think, again, there's going to be a concerted effort to kind of get that pass game, going and getting the offensive line into pass protection and allowing them to develop as well.
Look who's here. It's our old friend Vince D'Addario. How you doing?
What's up,
Vince?
guys? What's going on?
We're good.
The day job just gets in the way sometimes.
I hear you.
But excited to be here. Home opener. Here we go.
Absolutely. Well, we were just talking about the offense and the Texas A&M specific game plan and how it could look different really going forward. There's no doubt to me that, like Jesse said, I don't know about you, but the rushing total sort of flew over my head until I saw the number at the end of the game. And even then it didn't really register until I looked at it a couple of times. It's like they almost ran for 200 yards against this team.
198, I believe,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Now, granted, probably the most consistent runner was Riley Leonard, but then Price and Love both had big explosive plays that added to that total. But, again, I think you can probably take that for granted, but those guys just kept plugging away.
Yeah.
I think that Notre Dame has obviously been known for that. The next level of the evolution, though, is definitely going to be Riley Leonard, the passer, in terms of, we're not talking about it's got to be, bombs away all day and stuff like that. But the longest pass he completed was the 20. Well,
yeah. It was the 20
longest pass through the air anyway. Yeah, it was the 20-yarder, right?
Yep.
To Bo Collins.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was expecting a little bit more from the offense in game one. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I was a little disappointed, but at the same time, I think this is also a game situation where the win is the most important thing and you do what you got to do to win. And I think maybe maybe they had a bit of a different plan going into the game, but then the flow of the game happened, and it's like, okay, here's what we have to do to win this game. You know what I mean? And I think they dialed it back just a little bit, because I do think they missed a couple of things early, where they could have maybe stretched the field and some things like that. But as the game wore on, it was like, okay, you can kind of see what they're doing. And I think you make a really good point in that they were just chipping away. Look, they had 7 negative rushing plays. Like, that's not good. They need to cut that down, obviously. Too much penetration, guys go in the wrong direction, whatever the case may be. But this offensive line was the best offensive line in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's when they got the bulk of their rushing yards, was in the fourth quarter. And that's when it matters. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's when it matters. And they bullied them in the fourth quarter.
No, that's absolutely right. And then, like Marcus Freeman said, he was planning on winning a close game in the fourth quarter, and they absolutely took over the game on that majestic touchdown drive with, a pair of runs by Riley Leonard, a key 3rd and 5 to Jaden Greathouse, the key 20-yard pass to Bo Collins, and of course Jeremiah Love finishing off with the last 3 plays of the drive with a couple of explosives in the last 2 there. Do you think, as we've done the shows this week, and obviously listeners can tell us otherwise after the fact, because we do pre-record this show. This is the one that we record and we don't do live, so we're not getting live feedback, but so they can tell us if they feel differently. Do you feel like the attitude toward the offensive line has been generally more positive, or sort of you still have something to show me? Which direction do you think has been the majority?
It's funny because I think the majority of fans are like super excited about the offensive line right now. They're over the moon. And it's, when you look at it as a coach and you look back at it, it's like, well, they didn't really play that well. I mean, they played, well enough, right? Like, that's one of the keys to the game. Like, just don't screw up was basically for the offensive line, right? I mean, it's like, don't give up the big play. And they didn't. They accomplished that. And again, in the fourth quarter, they played well. There's a lot of mistakes, man. I mean, there was a lot of mistakes that they got to get cleaned up, and I see that happening. But I think overall, it's extremely positive, because I think from a fan perspective, they were expecting the absolute worst, and they got better than average, and they think it's amazing. You know what I mean? So it's like it's an overreaction on both ends, to be honest. True. The truth lies someplace in the middle, but at the end of the day, I think it was a positive result. I mean, no sacks given up. That's huge. 198 yards on the ground. That's huge. They didn't give up a ton of pressures.
Have you heard this, by the way? There were people in the show yesterday saying that someone from other sites or something were saying that they went back and they ended up crediting Texas A&M with a sack. I haven't found it on any web, like Notre Dame's website. It's not there on the stats. I hadn't. So I don't know who was talking about that, but that's a
solid question, because did Riley Leonard get tackled in the backfield one time? Yes, but it was a designed run.
Right.
It was not exactly a sack. He clearly tucked it and was trying to run the ball.
He was going forward with the football, yeah. And he only lost a yard, so he was
correct.
Only a yard shy, I believe, of the line of scrimmage. So,
that's not a sack.
So I'm looking at the official ESPN box score, and they have updated it to give Nick Scorton a sack. I don't know what play it was on, but when we looked at it yesterday, there was no sacks, and now that I'm looking at it again, they do have a sack in the box score. So I don't know when that was credited. I think it's kind of bogus that it's taken almost, a week to credit that sack or whatever. But, one sack, no sacks. It's not like there was a handful of sacks at the end of the day. So there's nothing.
A disputed sack.
Yeah, and again, I think, going back to your original question of positive or, negative or what, I have to say positive. But ultimately optimistic because of what Vince was talking about too. Like, this is still a raw group that can be developed and be even better than what they showed, and being even better than finding a way to win against Texas A&M, to me is, something to be even more excited about. And I think the reason why you have to say it's positive is because everyone in the national media said that they were going to lose this game because of the young offensive line, right? And so when you can find a way to do enough to win, I think that has to be a positive.
I think one of the positives as well is there wasn't a bunch of false starts and things like that, like jumping with all the crowd noise. And and knowing who's across from you and those kind of things. Like from a mental aspect, I think that's what you worry about the most when you've got young and inexperienced guys out there. Like, how are they going to handle that aspect of it? Excuse me. And I felt like they did great from that aspect last week. So I just, again, a very opponent specific game plan as it turned out. They weren't asked to block for a long time, like some blitzing and stuff like that, but that's more than just the offensive line, the running backs and those kind of things play into that as well. But I came away very, I won't even say pleasantly surprised, but just encouraged from what we saw from the line last week. I just felt like as a coaching staff, like you would be committing career suicide if you were throwing a couple of young guys like that out there, your entire left side of the line, if you weren't 100% confident that they were going to go out and get the job done, so I had to feel confident in that decision just based on that, because again, I don't think it was just Joe Rudolph making that decision. I think Mike Denbrock and Marcus Freeman all had input on that because it was such an important pair of decisions, with both of those guys getting those jobs.
It was ballsy for sure, but they obviously had confidence. And, I don't blindly just say trust the coaches, but in this regard, since we saw basically no practice, you kind of have to say trust the coaches, right? And they obviously saw something that they liked. And at the moment, after one game, it's working out. The arrow still has to point up, as they move forward. But as of right now, it's an absolute positive.
I mean, the easy decision was pick your veteran. Coogan had 13 starts. Spindler had 10 starts. That was the easy decision, just to let him play one of those two play left guard. I mean, that would have been the easy decision for sure. And even Tosh Baker, because of his experience, that would have been the easy decision. But, Nappy's obviously a little bit undersized. He doesn't have like a classic tackle body, but he moved pretty well. And he got the job done more times than not last week. So, again, I was pretty encouraged by what we saw. Defense is something that we talked about going into the game, that Notre Dame's defense, obviously, specifically, we all felt like there was really no national recognition of just how good and how big a factor Notre Dame's defense was going to be in this game. But, obviously, it was a huge factor. I mean, Connor Wigman, none of us were overly impressed with Connor Wigman going into that game. And he didn't just play one of his worst games because of his own performance. He played one of his worst games because of what Al Golden and that Notre Dame defense did to him last Saturday night. Jess?
Sorry, I was distracted for a quick second. I was trying to find kind of, the QBR here for Wigman, but I know it was something super poor. When a guy combines for 100 yards and they're not able to get really anything going on the ground, he had to find a way to kind of, create plays with his arm. And that's what he was supposed to be known for, a guy that can make, all the good throws. He's got a good arm and that sort of stuff. And, I think he got himself in trouble with some errant throws. He threw 2 interceptions. Obviously some points, I think 3 points came off one and then no points came off of the other, but it still goes towards that, overall turnover battle. And I think the part that was a little bit more frustrating to me is, a lot of people were saying that he was better than Riley Leonard, or that he was comparable to Riley Leonard. And I thought we would see more out of his legs as well, considering it was, a Colin Klein led offense. And I still think that they truly didn't capitalize on maybe, using his legs a little bit more, especially when the throwing and the, design runs to their running backs weren't as effective as they thought they would be. So, Riley Leonard proved to be the superior quarterback. He's a true dual threat guy you can create with his legs and his arm. Obviously he did a little bit more with his legs, but again, Riley Leonard, the quarterback, found a way to move the ball for Notre Dame. Connor Wigman didn't, and his arm, which again is supposed to be his best attribute, didn't do anything.
The QBR, by the way, 31.8 was Connor Wigman's QBR in that game. That would be not good.
I think anything below 50 is like considered you're just throwing an incompletion like every down. So he was worse than bad.
I mean, 100 yards passing. 2 interceptions and 100 yards passing, and they only averaged what? Yeah,
40% completion percentage.
Right, and like as a team, they only averaged what, like 3.6 per carry or something like that. So it was just a dominant performance by Notre Dame's defense, and to us anyway, it was very expected.
Yeah, I think that's the key, right? I mean, I don't think anybody's surprised at how well this defense played. I mean, there were some individual surprises maybe, although I thought Adon Schuler was going to be good. I don't know that I expected him to be as good as he was, and the mistakes that he made were aggressive mistakes, right? And, I think it was a mistake for people who were handicapping this game and were commenting on this game to ignore Notre Dame's defense. And that's what happened. They ignored Notre Dame's defense in this whole matchup. It was all about Texas A&M's front seven versus Notre Dame's offensive line. Guess who won that battle? It wasn't the front seven for Texas A&M. You know what I mean? And then the defense just said, yeah, we're really good too. We're the best defense on the field. Yeah.
Secondary was every bit as good as we thought it was going to be. It was elite, like we knew it was going to be. To me, though, Jess, and you can talk about this a little bit, with all those relatively inexperienced linebackers running in out there, Jack Kaiser had the most snaps, as we would expect, but all those other guys played really well. You drew up one of the plays that Jalen Sneed made on that tackle for loss, where he grabbed the guy's T-shirt, and there was the one that was down inside the red zone as well, where he crashed off the end and he made that huge tackle for loss. I mean, they just all I really liked the way they used those linebackers, because I would have thought you could get caught with a guy on the field who maybe you didn't want on the with just situationally with all the subbing and stuff like that, but they really played to their strengths, I thought, and it really showed. I mean, there were a couple early run fit issues, but as the game went on, wasn't an issue anymore. Again, like when you look at the 3.6 per carry or whatever the specific number ended up being.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the most important part there. It felt like there was never a weakness, with who was on the field, and you never felt like, man, I wish Drake Bowen was on, or KVA was on, or Sneed was on, or Osbury was on. They all played at a high level. And they definitely, kind of started out slow in terms of the run fit, but I mean, that's natural. These guys, it's their first big start on the road in a big game. They're naturally going to settle in and kind of just learn to trust their reads instead of just kind of, when you're playing all jacked up on adrenaline, sometimes you just can't, the game moves a lot faster than what it needs to, right? And so I think once their heart rate came down, the game slowed down for them a little bit. And the most impressive part about those linebackers is the type of linebacker that Marcus Freeman is recruiting. These are now Marcus Freeman recruits. All of these guys are fast. All of these guys can play downhill, and there's a ton of athleticism to these guys. And I think that's what was evident, on the field. And to me, the linebackers were a huge difference maker, because look at Texas A&M's linebackers. Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love put their linebackers in the mixer or in the blender and put jukes on them, all right? You didn't see that happen to Notre Dame linebackers. Notre Dame linebackers, once they got their hands on you or in open space, they were getting you down. And I think a lot of, those runs broke because of poor execution on behalf of the Texas A&M linebackers. So it was a pivotal part, in that game, especially in the fourth quarter. But I just love overall the athleticism. Those guys are now playing free and fast, and you can definitely see it on the field.
As we flip it now to this weekend in Northern Illinois, home opener, and my biggest concern for this game has been just the whole, is there going to be a mental letdown? 2 years ago, they go to Ohio State, they open really close, hard-fought game. Now, obviously, they lost that game, but then they came home and they lay a massive egg to Marshall. No, they were a lot better last year in terms of taking care of teams they were supposed to take care of. Vince, do you have any concern about that? How much do you think we find out about this team along those lines this weekend in this game?
I think Marcus Freeman made it very clear that, he can take care of the teams he's supposed to take care of last year, but last year is last year, right? I think we need to see it be a trend. And this is the first opportunity that this team this year, the 24 team, is going to have to make that case, right? I think if they can go through this year and, basically, I mean, for lack of a better term, put a beat down on, Miami, Northern Illinois, Army, Navy, if they can go and do what they've done to those teams like they did last year, then I think it's a trend. And we always used to say under the last regime, look, Brian Kelly beats the teams he's supposed to beat. Sometimes it's ugly, but he always beats the teams he's supposed to beat. Last year, Marcus Freeman not only beat the teams he was supposed to beat, but he beat the crap out of them.
He beat them down.
I mean, beat the crap out of them. So I think if we see that again today or tomorrow or Saturday, then we can start having that conversation that Marcus Freeman is now at least in that category that, okay, these are the games that he's going to win convincingly. These guys are going to be ready for it. It's not going to be an issue.
I'm gonna go ahead and play this from his Thursday Zoom.
There's no lack of motivation because all you got to do is watch the game and evaluate the plays. And we as a group see the work we have to put in. We got a lot of work to do. As you look at the outcome of the Texas A&M game, that's what we want, right? Obviously, you want to win the game, but when you evaluate every play. And there's a lot of different areas and plays specifically that we have to make sure we're improving at. And that's as a unit on each side of the ball, but that's also as individuals. And so we pushed them. We had really good Tuesday and Wednesday practice, long, physical, tough. I think sometimes getting back here at 4 a.m. and lack of sleep at times can have a trickle effect, but we couldn't let up. And we pushed them hard. And I told the coaches we can't pull off the gas pedal. And so they probably were wondering, hey, are we going to pull back? Because, we had a big win. They knew right away that we doubled down. So it was 2 really good weeks 2 really good days of practice. And now we have to fine tune some things before we get to Saturday.
And that last half of that cut there, Vince, is really what stood out to me, where he talked about we pushed them hard on Tuesday and Wednesday. And they had to make sure that this team stayed engaged through the fact that they weren't just going to, we're going to kind of take it easy because we're coming off a big win. Like, they continued to push them hard and maybe cut the team by surprise a little bit. The fact that they did push them off guard. And I loved hearing that.
But that's a good thing. I mean, look, Northern Illinois is a good MAC team. They're good in their conference, right? I feel like, after kind of watching them, they're going to be a team that's going to be in it in the end in their conference, right? And so, they're a solid team. They don't hold a candle to Notre Dame from a roster standpoint, but Notre Dame players know that too. And so you do have to kind of change the way you do things to make sure a team is still engaged in all of those. I mean, I think that's absolutely the right move on his part. We've seen what happens when you take a team lightly, right? Back when, they had that game against Ball State and they were basically playing all the backups during the week of practice because they were the ones that were going to get the reps and all this other stuff. They didn't even really get in the game. Okay.
I mean, that was like just the completely wrong mindset to have from the beginning. Telling your team early in the week, this game is going to be such a blowout. You guys need to be getting practice reps because you're going to end up playing on Saturday. Completely wrong mindset.
Yes. The worst mindset you could possibly have. And I don't think that will ever be the case under Marcus Freeman anymore. And I don't think that's the mindset that he had against like Marshall or Stanford or whatever a couple of years ago. But it was definitely eye-opening. And now I think he's much more deliberate about making sure that this team is focused and ready to go.
Yeah, I think the key word in that whole discussion is mindset, right? If you come into practice and you're basically, telling your players, or not telling, but allowing your players not to practice as hard, or you're saying, hey, let's make sure some of these backups get some reps because they're going to be getting into the game. That just creates a complacency mindset on behalf of the players. Even if you don't, it's just naturally what's going to happen, right? Things aren't going to be taken as seriously, and everything is not as critical. And so I think Marcus Freeman did the right thing of coming in and like he said, doubling down. Like, we were going to practice just as hard, if not harder, than what we did last week, because it's a whole season. You're not really looking at who you're playing. You're looking at getting better, accomplishing, what you want to as a team. And that comes from getting better offensively, defensively. Like you said, there was still, after watching the game, Vince said it earlier too, like there's still a lot of room and improvement for the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. And so that's what you have to focus on, is continuously getting better and not who your opponent is on Saturday.
Yeah, you can't worry about the backups until the starters do their job. Basically, that's what.
And I liked.
Go ahead.
I liked what we kind of were talking about the other day. Like, if these starters want to get the rest, take care of your business and let the backups come in the fourth quarter. That is when you're going to get your rest. Not during the week of practice. You're going to get your rest when you come out and do your job and take care of business.
And that's the charge that you give your starters, right? I mean, that's what you say. You don't practice the backups more than you normally do. You don't practice the starters any less than you normally do. What you do is, it's like, look, if you play hard, you do your job, then you get to reward these guys for getting you ready to do your job. Like that's the mentality that you have to have. It is your responsibility as a starter on this team to do your job so that you can give these guys over here an opportunity to play in front of their friends and family. It's your job. You put it on them. And I think that's the right mentality to have when it's such a lopsided, situation like this. You have to have the mentality of go out there, do your job for your teammates.
So Northern Illinois specifically, like you said, good MAC team. They were 7-6 last year. They won a bowl for the first time. The Camilla Bowl, or is it Camellia? Won a bowl for the first time in 12 years. Thomas Hammock, their head coach, he's an NIU alum. He was a running back for NIU and was a running backs coach for the Baltimore Ravens before he became the head coach at Northern Illinois. I think this is year 6 for him now, but they've got 18 returning starters back on offense and defense. They've got 11 players who have signed played in 40 or more games. So, I mean, a lot of experience. What does that say to you? Because, like, to me, in a transfer portal world, it's like, well, you're pretty good and you got a lot of guys back. But if they were really good, I think that they probably would have moved on and be on a Power 4 program someplace. It's like just good enough, but how good really are they?
I think it all depends on the culture that you have on your team and, things of that nature. And, the culture must be good enough that they're keeping guys around. Obviously, they're going to have opportunities to play a long time. But you're right. I mean, if they had guys that were all world, they'd be leaving and they'd be going, off to greener pastures and all of that stuff. That's a good point to make. I think in the past, the MAC has been a league where guys stick around because it's not all about the football. It's more than just that, right? And I think when that's the case, you generally have guys that stick around a little bit longer. But then you throw the curveball of the new transfer portal, and God, you never know what's going to happen. So I don't know enough about the Northern Illinois, culture to, really understand what it's like. But they obviously have something going on that guys want to stick around.
Yeah, I would largely agree with kind of everything that was said there. I think that, if these guys are talented enough, I mean, look at the player on the Chiefs last night. He's technically the backup running back. He is the Chiefs kick returner. He started at Ball State, had some good years, and then he got poached to go play at UCLA, right? Like, that's, to me, the natural progression. If you are good enough in the MAC, you're eventually going to get poached by some of these, these Power 4 schools. Look at Garrett Dieter, for example, when he was at Bowling Green. Like, he ended up going on and being a grad transfer at Alabama and got his way into the NFL as well. So
I was going to say Chuck Martin and the Miami, Ohio kicker. Remember a couple of weeks ago, losing, he got poached by Alabama.
Yeah. When you win the Lou Groza Award, I mean, it kind of puts your name on the map,
But yeah, I think that they definitely have a solid core. And I think their core has maybe kind of hit their ceiling, right? Because if they had more in the tank, or if they, like we were saying, if they were that super uber talented, they're going to find a way to go get more NIL money, find a way to get, their name out there more and have a better opportunity to go on to the NFL. So, I think these players are good. Don't get me wrong. Any college, football player is doing something right at the end of the day. But I don't necessarily buy that these guys are just so good that they could be potentially playing elsewhere. They just have a good core that's staying kind of within their realm, essentially.
They beat up on Western Illinois last week. Ethan Hampton, their quarterback, 328 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. They also ran for over 300 yards, had over 700 yards of total offense. This will be career start number 6 for the quarterback, Hampton, this weekend. Defensively, number 6 pass defense in terms of yards last year, number 62 run defense. So what do you guys need to see from the Irish in this game?
What I need to see from Notre Dame in this game is an offense that can develop passing plays downfield, especially kind of over the middle. I think you're going to see a lot of work done over the middle. A good point kind of came up when I was watching the Chiefs and Ravens game last night, and I think that's something that's naturally going to help Notre Dame as well. Is that Andy Reid loves having that speedster in the room, aka Chris Mitchell, so he can stretch the field, right? Like, you're just, even if the play isn't designed to go to someone like him, they're just occupying a certain part of the field, right? And I think the more he can get vertical, the more that kind of that middle of the field can open and more of these pass plays can develop. That's what I'm looking for out of the Notre Dame offense is, more development of plays downfield. I think the run game is naturally going to be, dominant. I think Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are going to have good days. That's kind of expected. What I want to see is more guys in the wide receiver room getting in the mix, and more plays kind of developing downfield. Defensively,
hold on. I just want to piggyback. This is a game where Chris Mitchell's speed should really stand out. A little bit tougher maybe against an SEC opponent with a pretty good secondary, but this is a game where Chris Mitchell's speed and a guy like Harrison as well, their speed should really pop in a game like this.
Yes. And then just to kind of wrap up defensively, what I was going to get into is, it's kind of hard to the defense played great last week. I think that the only thing I would like to see is maybe some more sacks, more pressures along the defensive line. I think a lot of people were critical of Riley Mills' game. I don't think he played horrible, but I definitely think that, that interior defensive line could do a bit more. So I'd like to see more of those pressures. We know what they can do in coverage. The linebackers just kind of continuing to build off of the game that they had. Don't want to see a lot of, bad run fits or anything like that. Just mental mistakes defensively, because I think mental mistakes come from not being locked in or engaged throughout the entire game. Like we said, I think that's the big focus is, yes, you're playing Northern Illinois, but you still have to stay focused and do your job.
Well, and it feels like you mentioned Riley Mills, and we've heard people throughout the week talk about Riley Mills and RJ Oben to some extent as well. Look, you can't base your total evaluation of these guys on one game and one opponent,
right?
Especially when it is, look, it's still an SEC opponent. They had SEC bodies out there. Like I've said, things are going to change over the next month because you're just not going to see the same kind of bodies. Now, there'll be some good players that they face and stuff like that, and other guys will still make plays, but it's just going to look different because, especially for those guys down in the trenches, they're not going up. Those were some of the biggest bodies one way or another that they're going to face all year.
No doubt about it. I think what I'm looking for in this game, I want, number one, they score on every drive. I want a couple of sustained.
Yeah. No James Rendell in this game.
Shouldn't need it.
I know I should have done an over-under on the punt in rapid fire.
Oh yeah. They need to. I'm talking about when the starters are in, right? So they need to score on every drive. I'd like to see a couple of sustained drives, and I want to see a couple of big plays. If they can do that in a half, then I'm happy. I don't, I'm not counting national championships on Saturday. That's not my goal. Offensively, I just want to see the maturation process of this offense, right? I want to see the offensive line play better than they did on Saturday, and I want to see them push the ball down the field a little bit. So some sustained drives, a few big plays, call it a day, hang it up. Defensively, look, they can't get better than they were defensively. So
it's hard to even say anything in that regard.
They just need to keep doing what they're doing. And as long as they just continue to do what they do, they're going to be just fine. So, I don't think there's anything tangible defensively. Sure, you'd like to see the front seven maybe get a few more sacks, that kind of a thing. And I'm sure that Northern Illinois is going to have to pass more than Texas A&M was because they're going to be trailing, so they're going to have more opportunities to pin their ears back and come after it. Look, we know Al Golden's not going to take it easy on them, right? He's going to bring pressure and things like that. So we're going to see more defensive explosive plays, tackles in the backfield, sacks, things like that. But it's to be expected. Like, I don't need them to show that to me because I already know that they can do it. So
yeah, and I mean, I expect to see what I need to see from the defense is just a quarterback who is harassed throughout the game.
Yeah.
Because again, this is a quarterback making his 6th career start. He's been around for, since 2021 was his freshman year, but he's made 6 career starts and he doesn't have a whole lot of experience. And again, look at how Connor Wigman looked last week. This guy, Hampton, was not a 5-star recruit like Wigman was. So I just expect to see a quarterback who's harassed with the kind of blitzing that Al Golden is going to do, and one who's going to make some pretty costly mistakes. So that's what I need to see from the defense. And offensively, I mean, you guys hit it. Just to I do want to see more downfield passing from Riley Leonard and the wide receivers. Again, I think this should be a game that sets up pretty well for Notre Dame, whether or not NIU was good against the pass last year or not. They were not good against the run. So I expect the combination of those two to make things really difficult for Northern Illinois in this game. You said something to the effect, Vince, of, you're not counting championships in this game. Jess and I were talking the other day, though, about Notre Dame's chances to go undefeated this season because their odds went up. They've still got the best chance of any team in the nation to go undefeated. And some people are kind of upset that we're even talking about that right now. What do you think? Are we allowed to talk about it after a win like last week, whether or not we think Notre Dame has the chance to run the table?
I would be upset if Marcus Freeman was talking about it.
Exactly.
Or if the players were talking about it. But guess what? We don't suit up. We don't call the plays. We don't run practice. We don't work. My office isn't at the Goog. It's on Bittersweet. So I don't think that what I say has any effect on the team whatsoever. So you're darn right we can talk about them being undefeated.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what we do.
When anything I say has actual impact in terms of performance on the field, I need a pretty big raise.
Yes.
That's,
100%.
Yes.
Nobody's listening to us over there.
We don't.
And that's fine.
We don't affect anything
that
happens on the field. So, whether we're talking about undefeated or whatever else, and some people are like, oh, you're going to jinx it and all that. Look,
whatever.
If you believe in jinxes like that, come on.
Listen, it's
would you like if you believe in like what you put out, like that whole manifestation or whatever, you should be talking about going undefeated, right?
Right. Exactly.
If you believe in karma, manifest, what you say becomes fact or whatever, actually, that kind of thing, you should be talking about going undefeated.
Wow, people are something else.
Guys, are you ready for rapid fire?
Ooh, baby, let's go. Rapid fire on a Friday.
Here we are. So Riley Leonard made an appearance at Dick's Sporting Goods today, right here in town. It was supposed to be a solo paid NIL appearance for Riley Leonard, but he said, hey, offensive lineman, come along. And he let the offensive lineman take the money. I guess they got, both payment in cash and gift cards for the appearance. What do you guys think of that?
I think Riley Leonard must be doing well in the NIL if he's already, passing along passing along his gifts to the offensive line. But I know he's got the one with Roback. I know he's got one with New Era. Him and Hannah Hidalgo, I'm pretty sure, are the New Era reps for Notre Dame. And so, Riley Leonard, he's going to do just fine in the NIL. And I don't even think at the end of the day it matters to him, right? I think he is just grateful for the opportunity to be at Notre Dame. He's talked before about how he's, a man of Christ and that sort of stuff. And I think that goes a long way with him too, being able to play at, a university like Notre Dame and further, connect or get his connection with God. And so it's just a smart move if you're Riley Leonard, because that's the group who's protecting you. You know it's a young group, and how do you get them to buy in and trust you more? You say, hey, let's come along and take all my free gifts. And so I think it's really smart of Riley Leonard, and I think he's a natural leader, and that's ultimately what you need out of the quarterback position, what you need out of the quarterback position, specifically when you're trying to make a run like Notre Dame is this season. The more he can build that trust amongst the offensive line, the better they're going to be. So I loved it. I think it was a total pro move, at the end of the day. It's like when the quarterbacks in the NFL buy their offensive linemen nice new watches or ATVs or, whatever it might be. While it's not, a new watch or anything, it's still something nice, and he didn't have to do it at the end of the day.
This is what quarterbacks have been doing since day one, taking them out for a steak dinner, giving them all the credit. Like, this is exactly what you do when you're a quarterback. That's called leadership. And everything Jesse said is correct, and it's accurate about all his NIL money and everything else. But even if he wasn't making all that money, this is what you do.
Yeah,
100%. Or you go and you take the money and then you take them out to eat. You know what I mean? Like, you get them involved. You show them you're appreciative. Like, it's leadership.
And a lot of times, like the NFL quarterbacks who you hear about doing it, wait until the end of the season and kind of give the lineman a bonus. I mean, this is perfect, like early season bonus from Riley Leonard, and just continue to get that buy-in. And all it's going to do is make those guys work harder for you at the end of the day to protect you. Riley Leonard knows where his bread is buttered. So good investment, and pretty cool to hear him doing that, taking the lineman out there. So Heather Dinich from ESPN, after last week's Notre Dame win over Texas A&M, posted on X, that was a signature win for Marcus Freeman. She said, I was on the field when they lost to Ohio State last year. This was another fight to the finish, but the Irish got it done this time. Turning point? ? So my question to you guys, do you buy or sell last week's win over the Aggies as a turning point for Marcus Freeman and the Notre Dame program?
I will buy it as it could be. I mean, if they lost this game, I don't think it would be a turning point towards the negative, but winning the game could be a turning point towards the positive. I mean, like, she's absolutely correct. I mean, they didn't win this game last year when they played against Ohio State. Now, nobody's going to say that Texas A&M is Ohio State, and I totally understand that, but this is the big game, and it was on the road. It was all of those things, and we talked about it in pregame, it being the biggest game of Marcus Freeman's career up to that point, and he won it. So absolutely, if this team does what we think they have a chance to do, we're all going to look back at game one, and we're going to be like, that's kind of where it started, man. That's where it got kicked off. That's where they got their confidence. And I think so I will tentatively buy it as a turning point.
I'm jealous Vince got to go first on this one, because I was basically going to say, like, I will buy it as a turning point if they accomplish what they're supposed to by the end of the season. If they go out and lose to, like, Purdue in a week or two, then you look back on and you say, well, that game was for nothing, right?
If they lose any game, to me, like, but your point is still taken. Yeah.
I just think that, again, Notre Dame has to accomplish what they're supposed to. They have to stay on track. Think about it, every game, game by game, and not get caught up in the big picture. But, if Notre Dame goes to the playoff, if they're undefeated, get that 5 seed, win a home playoff game, win a quarterfinal game, and potentially make a run for it in the semifinal game, then I think everyone will look back on it and say, you remember that win that Marcus Freeman had at the beginning of the season, and he was fired up in the tunnel? That was the turning point. That was a new era of Notre Dame football, and a new chapter in the Marcus Freeman coaching career. So that to me is it's that book is still to be written, I guess, at the end of the day.
No, I mean it's way, because there are a lot of people who do expect Notre Dame to go undefeated now this season because they beat Texas A&M. But like when you look at it, like in terms of, to her point, to Dinich's point about turning point, what's the previous biggest win Marcus Freeman had on the road in his 2+ years? Probably Duke last year, right? Because Duke was ranked with Riley Leonard. So big difference in the, in the environment and the amount of people. There were more than twice as many, probably almost 3 times as many people at Kyle Field last week compared to what there were for that Duke game. So this is definitely the biggest road game he's won. It's still an SEC team. It is still Texas A&M and a good head coach and Mike Elko, but it's at a very minimum, it is a road win over a ranked SEC team, and that obviously counts for a lot of people because, as we know, the college football world, I think, puts a lot on those SEC programs, whether they all completely deserve it or not. Let's talk a little bit of wide receivers. Fill in the blank. Here's what Notre Dame's wide receiver snap count looked like against Texas A&M. Bo Collins, 59 snaps. Jaden Greathouse, 48. Chris Mitchell, 32. Jaden Thomas, 23. Jordan Faison, 20. Jaden Harrison, 9. And that means blank going forward.
To me, that doesn't mean much going forward because I think that, there was – I figured that Greathouse might be the guy to kind of lead in snaps overall, but it felt like that they had, more confidence in Bo Collins being that guy because of the experience that he provides, right? Like he's played in some big games at Clemson. He's played in tough environments. And not to say that Greathouse hasn't, but Collins has just done it more. So I wasn't surprised by the end of the day to see Collins as the lead kind of snap count. And obviously, Greathouse was going to be closely behind because they've talked about how he's going to be a wide receiver that can play the slot, the outside, the field position. No matter where it is, Greathouse can play, right? I think with Faison being hurt, this also doesn't mean much as well because there's going to be a kind of reshuffling. I think KK is going to get
to that. We'll get to that in a minute.
Is going to get into the mix as well. So, for game one, for a game plan that was very specific to Texas A&M, I don't think that we should take much into this kind of snap count type situation. I think it's going to be, just like any offensive game plan, I think it's going to be dependent on, what the goals are for that game and what they're trying to accomplish. And I think that, Bo Collins was that guy because he had the most experience.
It doesn't mean anything to me a whole lot. I mean, they probably, at certain points, they probably had their best blockers in the game as well, and I agree with Jesse. I think they trust Bo Collins a lot, and I think he gave them a reason to trust them at the end of the game. And so he was in the game a bunch. And I think Greathouse is still going to get a bunch of snaps. He's going to be on the field a lot. Chris Mitchell's going to be on the field a lot. You know what I mean? So, unfortunately, we're not going to get a whole lot of clarity on it over the next few weeks because the next few weeks aren't all that competitive probably. So, we should probably compare the snaps between like A&M, Louisville, Florida State.
We will. It's going to be a thing. I've decided that it's going to be a thing this year because apparently people love the snap count stuff, and I didn't realize it.
Okay.
So I am into the Pro Football Focus, and that that's where I got all the numbers from. So we're gonna do some snap count stuff.
All right.
Season. We'll kind of compare. Different, like, are they up, are they down, and just all that kind of stuff. So
it'd be nice when we have a couple of other data points as opposed to just one game.
Yeah, I just feel like, to me, it's pretty obvious that Bo Collins is the guy, you said it, Vince, who they trust the most, and I think that there's some comfort with Riley Leonard, and you can just see, like, someone on the beat, I think it might have been Matt Freeman, like during training camp, tweeted some video of Bo Collins when he was a high school kid camping at Notre Dame, what he looked like running his routes and just his body and the whole stuff versus what he looks like now as a grown man, basically 4 or 5 years later. But like you can just see that instinctually, because of all the games that he has played in and because of the specific position that he plays, that size with the bigger body. I feel like there's a lot of trust in Bo Collins. And between Collins and Greathouse, the two guys with the most snaps, I think that those two guys are going to end up being the volume guys in this receiver core over the course of this season, where these other guys, they're going to make some plays here and there. That doesn't mean that they're not going to see the ball. But I just really feel like Collins and Greathouse is obviously a little bit younger, but he's got that big body and the versatility that Jesse talked about. So I just feel like those two guys, Collins and Greathouse, are going to end up being the volume reception guys for this team. And that's, it's still early, so we'll see exactly how it plays out. But that's kind of the vibe I got just watching, because again, like so much of it comes down to trust. Who does the quarterback trust? Who does the offensive coordinator trust? Who does the position coach trust? And I think that those two guys are definitely at the top of the list right now. So, as Jesse mentioned, Jordan Faison is going to be out this week. He's got an ankle injury, unfortunately, that he suffered last week. Could be out for this week and next week. We will kind of wait and see how that plays out. But with him out, we're going to see more of redshirt freshman KK Smith.
It's a guy that we said, hey, he could possibly get in the game versus A&M. And he ended up not getting in the game, but we have a lot of confidence in KK. Micah Gilbert's another guy that I think we'll see this week. We had a plan to say, okay, we have 6 guys that we know at any point can be the starter, be on the field. 7th and 8th at that point was KK and Micah, and with Faison being down, KK will have a increased role. But there's a lot of confidence from Micah Gilbert on down to everybody in that room, and we'll see. I think we'll see him on Saturday for sure.
I mean, we're, as he kind of alluded to, we're probably pretty. If the game plays out the way we expect, we're going to see a lot of different guys out there. But what kind of factor, Vince, do you think that KK Smith could be?
Well, it's so hard to say just because of the way this game is going to go. I mean, he is a Jaden Harrison type of guy, right? So Jaden Harrison got 10 snaps in this game, had a couple catches, something along those lines. I think it'll be something similar while the first team is out there. Once they start putting in the 2s and stuff like that, obviously I think his workload increases and things like that. And I'm anxious to see what they do once they get the second guys in there. Are they still running the offense? Are they just running it up the mid? All of those things. And so, he'll have an impact, but I don't think it'll be huge.
Yeah, I think that the more majority of what you'll see out of KK Smith is when the starters are out there. I think you'll see him out there. How much of an impact he has, I don't think is going to be super, noticeable. I would say like he's maybe going to have a catch or two. I think the most you'll see out of KK Smith is potentially when Steve Angeli is quarterback, and that's assuming.
I was thinking the same thing.
He gets in there, so I think that's when you would want to see KK Smith, and I think that's naturally what's going to happen as well. Is some nice quick slants, some check downs. Letting KK Smith kind of operate in space with Steve Angeli at quarterback.
Vince's face was caught in a yawn, frozen on the screen there.
Oh, no.
And it was hilarious.
Whoops. I tried to stop the
camera.
camera.
Tried to close it out. Yeah, that's right.
It hit me fast and hard.
Yeah. I'll just I won't say a whole lot because I think you guys both pretty much covered it. I do think that his biggest impact is like once Steve Angeli and some of the 2s are in there. That's probably when he's going to have his most opportunities. But the guy is a speedy guy. So again, like I was saying with Chris Mitchell earlier, this is a game where Chris Mitchell's speed should really be pretty obvious, and maybe some deep opportunities there. It could happen with KK Smith, depending on how many early reps he gets in out there as well. Mitch Jeter hit 3 field goals last week. A couple of 46-yarders included. What's your confidence in him after seeing that performance last week?
I mean, to me, your confidence has to be 10 out of 10. He's in a hostile environment, pressure situations, and the guy was nails. And, I love this question because I felt like we didn't nearly talk about him enough or bring him up during the week. He hit some critical field goals, especially when Notre Dame needed to respond to get some points on the board. And again, he looks like a seasoned vet out there, right? He didn't look like the moment was too big. I thought he executed perfectly. And, the kicking game becomes magnified in close games like that. And I think that's what they're going to need, especially as they get into maybe against, Georgia Tech, Louisville, USC, into the playoffs, etc. Like you need a kicker that you can rely on. And so right now I'm 10 out of 10 confident. He hasn't shown me otherwise. And I was really impressed with the way he was able to stay composed in that environment and hit some big kicks.
My confidence level of Mitch Jeter going into the game was about a 9.5, and now it's a 10. So
wow.
I know he didn't look the greatest in practice, but his in-game stats are unbelievable, and I don't see how putting on a different helmet would change that. So I had a lot of confidence in him being a gamer. He's proved it in SEC play. Again, not that necessarily matters because you're a kicker and
right.
But the environment does. The environment matters, and he's been in some hostile environments before. So I had a lot of confidence in him going in, and he just proved me right. So I appreciate that. So I'm bumping it to a 10.
I'm just going to be honest. Mine was probably a 6 because basically the lingering impression that I had is what we saw of him at the end of the spring and a little bit in practice. And he wasn't, like, especially in the spring,
it's terrible.
He wasn't very accurate. Yeah, he was just downright. And that's, again, I know that he's got a body of work and we saw all his numbers from South Carolina, but it is a change of scenery and it's a different operation and the whole thing. And I personally, I just want, like, has this guy lost it? What's going on? But I would say it is definitely a 10 right now after seeing that last week when we were able to bang a couple of 46-yarders and go 3 for 3 and be able to put the game away at the end, because you could say it was a meaningless field goal, but it made it a 2-possession game. It made it virtually impossible for Texas A&M, or completely impossible.
That was far from meaningless to me because one thing can go wrong. You can throw a pick, you could fumble the ball, and you want to be up 2 possessions, period, end of discussion. So that was far from meaningless to me. I think that was the most pressure-packed field goal he had, in my opinion.
And there were people, you kind of heard it, where people were like, well, do you put the field goal team out there? Do you risk a block and all that stuff? There's just as much of a risk of a block punt if that's what you're going to do instead, or a fumbled snap on any given snap, no matter what. There's risk on any play. So I had no problem with running the kicker out there and doing it the way they did it.
Especially if you have the confidence in them that we do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you absolutely let them kick it.
Yeah. And someone did say, it might have been on the message, again, between the message boards and our chat, during the show, the fact that Marty Biaggi, he's got 2 new kickers this year, place kicker and a punter, new holder, new long snapper, new short snapper. All the operations are completely different, and they were pretty sharp out there Saturday night.
Agreed. It was fun to watch.
So I'm gonna work a punt question. Over under 1.5 punts for James Rendell against Northern Illinois.
I'll go over, 1 for the starters, 1 for the backups. I think you'll naturally get 1 maybe towards the end of the game. And I know Vince is going to be mad at me, but I don't think the offense is going to be immaculate and score on every drive. I want them to, but I don't know if it's going to happen. So I lean more towards the side of air, and I like I said, kind of 1 for each group. I think at the end of the day. So give me the over.
I'm taking the under for James Rendell, but I'm going to take the over for actual punts in the game because remember, there's a 30-year-old who's probably going to get a chance to punt in this game.
Ah, good one. I didn't think about it that way.
Vince hitting us with the back alley answer.
Captain, Mr.
Right.
Goins.
Yep.
I didn't think about that.
Goings is going to get a punt, and I think he's going to get a couple, actually, because the second and third, I think they're going to end up with 2 or 3 quarterbacks, and so eventually Northern Illinois is going to be able to stop them. And
are you telling me it's going to be CJ Carr time or Kenny Minchie time?
I'm not saying either one. It depends on how they want to do it. But I think they find a way to get 3 on the field, and I don't know that they're going to be able to lead scoring drives. If Northern Illinois puts their backups in, then you still have, the differentiation of talent, and Notre Dame still may score. But I'm still taking the over, but I just don't think it's going to be Rendell.
I can't see it being CJ Carr out there. Can you imagine what the reaction is going to be if you throw CJ Carr out there and he leads a touchdown drive right away? Yes. I'm not saying that's why you're not putting him on the field, but I just don't see him going.
That's all we'll talk about.
I know. Northern Illinois had a 60-yard pass play and a 60-yard run play last week against Western Illinois. Over under 20 yards for the longest play they will have this weekend against Notre Dame?
This one's tough. I'll take the over. I think they might accidentally get 20 yards, so I'll take the over.
I gotta go over as well. No defense is perfect. They're bound to hit some sort of busted play, maybe trick play that they've been scheming up for their first drive of the season, so they can maybe find some points. Or sorry, first drive of the game, not season. But it's just that'd be a lot to ask of a defense. So I'm just gonna go over because I think naturally that's what's gonna happen.
I'm going to go under. I'm going to say under, at least when like the starters are out there. So maybe I'm cheating a little bit. Like I'm not going to rule out something to happen late in the game when you've got some second and third string guys out there. But I'll say when the primaries are out there, I'm going to go under 20 yards as long as play that Northern Illinois hits. Fill in the blank. Northern Illinois refers to games against Power 4 teams as boneyard games. They have 18 all-time what they call boneyard wins dating back to 1983.
I think it's a pretty cool concept at the end of the day, right? When you are a MAC school, you're not in the Power 4, Power 5, you got to have some external motivation. So when you go into a game like Notre Dame, that you should never think that you're going to lose. And I think they definitely don't think that. And I think they know that they're the underdog and their coach is going to sort of buy into that. And that's why you have something like the boneyard type situation. So you get that recognition of going in and upsetting someone, because that's what it is. Boneyard wins are just upset wins at the end of the day. So I think it's a cool concept. I think it's something that's fun to get the players, to get some of that extra motivation at the end of the day.
It's friggin' great. When we were going around to different MAC schools and stuff like that, they all had some sort of something that depicted their Power 4 wins.
Oh,
and
that's probably how they're like they rate themselves, right?
Oh, 100%.
It's like Boston College, for example, last year to open the season.
It's like, look, we can play with the big boys. You know what I mean? Come here, you get to play with the big boys. That kind of a thing. And so I dig it, man. I think a lot of these, the group of 5 teams, they're extremely creative with a lot of the things that they do, and I appreciate it, and I like it a lot.
Creative was actually going to be the word that I was going to use. Very creative to go in this boneyard wins, because they're obviously the Huskies, so you got boneyard and that whole connection. And you're right. Like anytime I do, like when I'm preparing for a basketball game and you get the game notes and Notre Dame is playing one of these, like a MAC level school or something like that, there is always part of their notes that says, first what the current coach has done against like the group of, 5 group of, or Power 5, Power 4 type programs. And then of course, something like this as well, that dates back like what they've done all time. I mean, that's how they measure themselves. And I think that that's part of how they sell themselves to recruits. Like you can come here and we're still going to compete with the big boys and girls.
Yep, we'll put you on that stage, and it'll be competitive. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so we've come to the part of the show. I don't know how this is going to go. I want to have the Pat McAfee conversation here because it's the 3 of us, and I think that we're going to get some distinctly varying opinions on this. Do you buy or sell Pat McAfee being good for college game day? And we're going to start with the chin rubber there, Vince D'Addario.
You just want to start with the negative guy. I see where you're going with this. I think that my answer is going to surprise you, though. I think it's actually good for game day because he has a hell of an audience. People like to watch him and his antics. I will say that I'm 50-50 on McAfee. I enjoy some of the stuff that he does. Some of it's over the top and I get annoyed. But I think it's good for college game day, and I think it's good for college football. And just ask the Texas A&M kid who finally hit a field goal. It was good for him. He made $50,000.
Yeah, and they let him. He got a re-kick too.
Yeah, and I will say this. I think that segment is friggin' awesome. I love the field goal kicking segment because
gee, I wonder why.
Well, you need to get kicking's easy. That's all I'll say. People think kicking is easy, and it takes a hell of a lot of work to be a good kicker. And I think that that's fantastic. So I actually like his show. He's very upfront with the fact that he's not an expert. that kind of stuff. And
Vince, you're just ruining this whole question. Like, I was not expecting you to go this direction.
Like I said, 50% of the stuff he does annoys the crap out of me, but I do find him entertaining at times. So I think it's good for football.
I buy it because he brings a different dynamic to that set, and it's something that none of them have, right? And I think that allows them to enjoy themselves more and bring kind of a lighter side to college football. It's not all about X's and O's.
He sits right next to Saban,
and he's the polar opposite.
Exactly. But guess what? Nick Saban loves the guy.
I think he is the definition of the fan that a lot of people have in them at the end of the day. He brings out the fan in a lot of people, right? And I think, like, hearing him sing, what was it? Like, Take Me Home, West Virginia last week, and then at the SEC championship last year when he starts singing one team's fight song and then, stands on the table and completely, changes direction and that sort of stuff. Pat McAfee is authentic. He's true to himself. Yeah. He's going to give you the same thing every week. And again, I like the diversity that he brings to a set that is relatively, outside of Lee Corso, it's very kind of buttoned up. This is how you're going to do things, and
it's definitely
analysts
they all keep their shirts on.
That's like when I watched him take the shirt off, I was like, do we really need to see McAfee take the shirt? But then at the same time, I was like, this guy's a punter, and it's like he's
and then he puts his arm around Saban.
Shape,
he's got no shirt on.
Yeah, that's right.
That's where it goes over the line for me.
It is. I did find it very curious the way they have that table set up or the desk set up. McAfee sits right in the middle. Like
he's like the host,
he's like the center square. Yeah, it's like McAfee's in the middle and Saban is next to him. And then you got Reese Davis, you got Fowler and Desmond sitting on the extreme outsides on opposite ends. I was really struck by the fact, because usually you would just put the host, like Reese Davis would sit in the middle, then everyone else is basically and that's kind of how you would go. But they've got Davis sitting off to the side. And I mean, I agree obviously with a good chunk. Like, I think people forget that part of the business is being able to entertain, and Pat McAfee obviously entertains, and he does keep that set loose. He keeps Nick Saban a little bit looser. Saban's on his show during the week with him as well. Herb Street has said like he was getting a little bit burned out, maybe as long as he'd been on Game Day with just all the different stuff. But when McAfee came on, he's the reason that he stayed on. So
wow,
I think it's pretty cool. And again, he's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but the guy was an NFL punter. And I think that's important to remember. The guy was a punter. Like, how many punters go on to any kind of media career?
Yeah.
And he has turned this thing. He's just kind of put it all on himself and built this little mini empire. And it's led to not only his own show being on ESPN every day, but obviously being part of Game Day as well. So I think it's pretty incredible just the path that he's gone on to get there. This obviously wasn't on Game Day, but I was texting you guys when they were in Ireland a couple of weeks ago in week 0, and he was in that pub with Saban sitting next to him in the pub, and the man was just an animal with the Guinness. They would bring him a glass of Guinness, like a full pint of Guinness, and he wasn't just, like taking a drink or two, set it down. Every glass they brought him was just straight down the chute, and he did 6 in the first hour of the show, just like that, straight down the chute. For what I understand, he had to step off the set for a little bit and kind of recollect himself. But
well, they were saying too.
I mean, if they would have let us do that on our old show back in the day, Vince, like I wouldn't have minded that on a Friday afternoon.
He just takes it to another level, though. He was practically blacked out, man. Like
there was a guy from an Irish football club sitting next to him. They start the interview, and like 5 minutes into the interview, he reintroduces himself to the guy. But you know what? The next day, they're doing game day, and he's
Back to normal.
He's back to normal. Doing
You
it
wouldn't
like
know
nothing
he just
ever happened the day, but yeah, it's like who knows what happened after that show was over either. You
You
know?
can rally.
Oh my goodness.
It was funny listening to him talk about, because he was in West Virginia the night before the college game day at Texas A&M, and he said he got in so late he had to sleep on the bus waiting to get up to do college game day at Texas A&M. And he said, Texas A&M were practicing or doing their, like rally cries or cheers the night before. And he said from the bus, like he could hear it. It was waking him up. So it's like, to me, the guy is an animal. He's just all over the place, doesn't need much rest, can drink all these beers. He's kind of envious of him. He's like getting older and he's not slowing down by any means. So,
all right, game props. Let's do some player props. Riley Leonard's official over under 205.5 yards. And
in the air,
205.5 passing yards and 1.5 touchdown passes. Those
over.
Yeah, over. I agree. I think there's going to be an emphasis on throwing the football.
I think so too. I'm not entirely confident because, again, like last week skewed me a little bit, but I think that he's going to get over on both of these as well. His rushing yards, 42.5 is the number.
Even if he's not running the ball a ton, I still think he could get a couple big ones, right? And so, I don't know. Naturally, I think the competitor in him is going to want to run some of these, but at the end of the day, I think they're going to be like, listen, you don't need to run. You don't need to take extra hits. Let's focus on maybe passing the ball. So I'm going to talk myself into the under on this one.
Well, I agree with you, Jesse, but to be contrarian, I'll take the over. Because if he just breaks one run like that,
that's what I'm worried about. It's just one big one.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm seeing is really all it's going to take is probably one run, and he'll run past, the 90%.
Then he'll get yelled at, and he'll be like, "Okay, I won't run anymore."
That's right. So I've got to go over on that as well. Jeremiah Love, rushing yards, 67.5.
Over.
Way over.
I think he's going to hit a 100-yard game.
I think so too. I think
there's a chance both him and Price hit 100 yards.
I wouldn't doubt it. Price doesn't have a number on FanDuel. It was only Leonard and Love for the rushing. Receiving numbers: Jaden Greathouse, 31.5.
Over.
Yep, he had 26 last week. Bo Collins, 48.5.
I think he's going to get his fair share too. I think that's really, 3-4 catches. And again, if this offense is going into a little, at least the first half and maybe the third quarter, I'd like to say the over as well.
Yep. Take it. Book it.
Only thing that makes me question it is, again, like who they're playing and the fact that you might see some other guys get more involved in the pass game, whether it's Chris Mitchell or Thomas or whoever it happens to be. But I'm over on Collins' number as well. The line right now, as we speak, Notre Dame favored by 27.5, and their point total 37.5. Northern Illinois' point total 7.5. The over/under for the game is 44.5. So keep those numbers in mind as we do our predictions. Who wants to go first? Jesse?
I'll go first because I don't think mine has been made official yet. You two are just going to regurgitate whatever you put out in the article earlier.
Has that been posted? Are we out there?
It has been posted. It is out there.
All right.
I'm going to go Notre Dame 44, Northern Illinois 0. I think that they're going to pitch a complete shutout. I don't think it matters defensively who is out there for Notre Dame because we said this earlier in the week. They rotate so many people that they already are getting in second and third string type of guys, right? So I think we might potentially see some fourth string, but those guys are going to be – those are guys who can be playing for Northern Illinois at the end of the day, right? And so I just think that Notre Dame is going to handle business. I don't see them – listen, if they give Texas A&M's offense fits, then they're going to give this offense even more fits. And I am confident to say that Notre Dame defense kind of not handed Texas A&M some points, but they had some boneheaded penalties early on that led to some points for Texas A&M. And if they can clean that up defensively, I don't see why Northern Illinois should score in this game. So I think they cover. I think they hit the over on their total points. And I think Northern Illinois is definitely under in a 44-0 game.
I just have to ask you, Jesse, because we talked about the odds on this yesterday. Plus 430, the odds for Notre Dame to get a shutout. Did you lay something on that?
Yeah, I have 100 on Notre Dame to cover, 29.5, and 25 on the defense to put on a shutout.
Wow. 29.5 is what you got?
I took an alternate spread to get like plus money on
to get a little bit more money. Gotcha. Okay. Vince, your prediction?
I'm taking over all of that because I feel like my prediction is 49-10, and so if I'm going to say it's 49-10, then that's over for Northern Illinois on points. Yep. It's over for Notre Dame on points. It's over for the combined points, and Notre Dame's covering. So I have to stick true to my word, right? Because that's what I think is going to happen. So I think points are going to be easy to come by for Notre Dame. I think the 10, probably comes later on in the game. I agree that this defense shouldn't let Northern Illinois score while the first team is out there. But I think Notre Dame subs in before Northern Illinois does, and maybe they get a touchdown. Maybe they get a field goal. You know what I mean? So, I think they're going to score, but I don't think it'll be by very much. So 49-10 is my prediction.
See, I still think that it's early in the season and Al Golden's stubborn enough. I don't think you're going to see Notre Dame backups until maybe the fourth quarter.
I think
the defense.
You're going to see backups when Marcus Freeman says, "Al, put the backups
in." That's also fair.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to try to protect the shutout and that kind of thing if it's at that point. But yeah, I do have 45-10 Notre Dame winning, so I am over on all those. Now, I'm not completely even confident that Northern Illinois is actually going to score a touchdown, but I feel like I think this one, how this game goes is largely going to sort of determine how I'm going to predict the next couple of games, basically. You know what I mean? If Northern Illinois doesn't find the end zone, and if Northern Illinois does get shut out, I think that's a not quite the statement as holding A&M to 13 points, but it's going to be a pretty big statement of its own. So I just think a lot of guys are going to play in this game, obviously, and I think it's going to be a big offensive day and a turnover-filled day for Northern Illinois and their quarterback, Ethan Hampton.
I'm trying to see if I can find, usually on FanDuel, there's a winning margin, and I would definitely take Notre Dame to win by like 40 plus, but I can't find it anywhere.
All right.
Sorry to let everyone down.
That's okay. Well, that's going to do it for this show. IB Countdown to Kickoff. Hit the like button. I guess, we just asked that you hit the like button. There's nobody in the live chat like usual. And, of course, if you're listening on your podcast platform, give us a review, rate us, and, of course, follow the podcast, follow it, subscribe to it, the whole thing. We appreciate you. Post-game show coming up after the game. Notre Dame and Northern Illinois, of course, kickoff at 3:30 Eastern time. Post-game show after, and we'll be back, Vince and I, on Monday with IB Countdown to Kickoff. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game, and we will talk to you then on IB Nation Sports Talk.